questions?
Oh, I have time. So absolutely.
Okay, amazing. We have some good questions, and your speech was so, as I said, comprehensive and covering every single aspect of building and even selling a company. I want to go back to the topic of our questionnaire, to pivoting. So if you can see the results, that would be amazing. Let's see. You kind of covered the reasons to pivot and also the strategies to pivot. So I would like to see what did our participants said. So okay, the question was, when is the time to pivot? Number one response, 38%, when the company is not solving the consumer's problem. Second one, consumers are not ready to pay to a startup, 31%. Third place went towards the strategy to acquire new consumers is not effective and is not giving enough growth to the startup. And then we have 7% and 5% that went towards the manufacturer or creation of the product is too expensive, and the startup is not capable of finding new consumers. So again, first place, startup is not solving consumer problem. Second place, consumers are not ready to pay.
Yep.
What would you say about it? Maybe we can add something. Do you agree or don't agree with our participants?
I agree with number one for sure. I mean, when the customer, when the company is not solving the customer's problem, that goes to my bullet number two, which was customer's not 100% happy, right? Customer is only, let me see if I can go back here. Customer is only,
you had really great slide about this. So I would say everybody should take screenshots and ask for a presentation afterwards.
Yeah, I just want to show you. So that 38% would be sort of customers not 100% happy. So I agree with that. And the other one was that customers not buying, which is also, that's my first bullet, right? Which is that, you know, here you go, right? You see that? So if you look at my second yellow bullet, when do you consider you're trying hard, you can't get much traction? So that would be your 31%, customers not buying. I have one here that you don't have, which is about the scalability of the business, right? It's you don't have a repeatable process, so therefore the company is not scalable. When you find yourself constantly having to do something over and over again in a different way when you're making a sale, it's time to pivot. It's time to pivot into something that's repeatable and scalable. So I would add that to it. I don't know what you guys think about that. There's a lot of reasons to consider a pivot. I think your poll was excellent. They asked a number of different things, and I think a lot of it's industry specific. It depends on the industry, right? Some industries, it's all specific to the company, in fact, even. So, yeah.
So on that point, there is a question from Mikhail. He's asking, what is the definition, the borders of a pivot? If the same team starts completely new idea, is it still a pivot?
That's a great question, because when I first, I was thinking about this slide this morning when Natalia said, when do I pivot? So my first question was this question: what is a pivot? What is a pivot? How do you define a pivot? And I think, to my bottom here on the slide, I talk about these micro pivots. Like, you're micro pivoting every day. You're micro pivoting every month. You're always doing some micro pivot. I think a pivot is where you're making a change that's big enough that it could impact big chunks of your company. So there are big pivots and then there's small pivots. But any pivot, I think, involves it involves a well thought through plan, and it involves it's more than just a small decision, is what I'm saying. It's hard to describe. I'd say a pivot is it's a big decision. It's a big decision. So it's a big decision. That's how I would sort of define it. I'm sure that Steve Blank has a much better definition for pivot than I do, but But that is a core question. What is a pivot? So when I say pivot in this context, I'm talking about, making a big change, whether it's changing your product, changing a feature in your product, changing a marketing strategy, changing a geography, changing, a target market or target audience. Those are, that to me is what I mean with pivot, by the word pivot.
Thank you for helping us understand it better. You've mentioned on our culture and a system, on the different way of thinking in Silicon Valley. And everybody knows that United States is highly regulated, especially the larger the industry, the higher regulations are. So how does the Silicon Valley creates innovation? How does it get away with all the wild, crazy changes and disruption that is created there?
When you say how does it get away, are you talking about like how does it circumvent government regulation, or are you saying how does it?
It's basically, so when the entire industry and let's talk about bigger industries. We just had our previous speaker. We were talking about oil industry and gas industry, agriculture industry. And Silicon Valley somehow still has the startups that are disrupting these big industries and kind of walking the border of the government regulation or the corporate.
It's a very simple answer. The answer is that the government cannot keep up with the innovation that's coming out of these ecosystems. The government regulations is a hindsight process. The government sees a situation, they regulate it. They see another situation, they regulate it. The guys that are creating these situations are the guys in Silicon Valley. They don't try to skirt the government regulation. They say, I'm going to do something faster, better, cheaper. I'm just going to do it. And the government doesn't even get involved until there's a problem, whether it's an anti-competition issue or a privacy issue in Facebook's case, or an antitrust issue in Microsoft's case. The government gets involved way after the fact. Like the government cannot regulate for the future, for innovation. They just can't keep up with it. That's not what they're built for. They're built for public security and safety. So to the extent that like Google, right? Google wasn't regulated because who would regulate a search engine, right? And then they became this ad marketplace, and now they're getting scrutiny way after the fact. So I don't think it's a matter of the companies doing anything nefarious. I think the companies are entrepreneurs. They see opportunity, they see dislocation, and they go for it. And the government is just sort of along for the ride. And the government's fine with it until something bad happens. And then a lot of people complain, like, hey, Google owns this ad marketplace. And then the government takes a look at it, and then they start regulating it.
So it usually comes after the event already happened.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Rather than the bureaucracy beforehand.
Yeah. I think even, I mean, yes. The people I know in Silicon Valley, they don't even think about the government, really. When they're going out and hustling, they're building a product, they're selling it, they don't really even think about, anything with the government because they're so far ahead, Yeah,
there is a saying, go build and break things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's a part of the culture. A technical question from Alexandra. A couple of our participants want to come to your events in October. So if you can pull up the slides with the link while we're taking last two questions, guys. Last two questions. And thank you, Tien, so much for your extra time.
My pleasure.
The question is from Anatoly. You mentioned choosing partners in your fundraising and choosing investment bankers and professionals. What about venture scouts? Is there any benefit to a startup founder being in touch with venture scouts?
With who?
Venture scouts, venture capital scouts.
So if they are in your domain, yes, I would say it doesn't hurt. It's good to know all the people in your ecosystem, your own industry ecosystem, or where you're playing. It's like a neighborhood. I look at it. It's good to know your neighbors. So the answer is sure. If it's somebody who's outside of your neighborhood, then I would say you got to think about it because you don't want to waste your time. Time is precious. And to the extent they are good people and they're smart and they're experienced, they could add a lot of value for you. You know, I think that it's very simple. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I think your job is, even as a CEO of a huge company, your job is to take care of the customer. So all your time should be spent on the customer. You know, what do they want? What do they need? How can I do better? How can I lock them in to become customers for life? So, you know, the venture scouts, the VCs, the private equity guys, the buyers, they'll come to you when you have a successful business. They will be coming to you. You will not have to go to them, you know?
And to finalize this amazing talk, can you give us an advice or an example of companies that are not just doing the hard work and building a startup, but also having fun?
Wow. Are you talking about entrepreneurs or are you talking about the employees within the companies?
I guess both.
Well, before the pandemic, I would say, does it have to be a startup or is it a large company or?
Well, I guess most of the startups are working hard, and it seems like, especially to take company from zero to growth, that's the toughest part. So maybe you have some good examples of how to have fun as a startup.
Yeah. So, okay, when I say have fun, I mean, enjoy what you're doing, you know, enjoy the journey. So someone who's trying to run a marathon or climb Mount Everest, they're suffering a lot. They're training, they're dieting, they're getting sleep, they're stretching, they're working on everything, their mental game. And it's painful, man, no pain, no gain, right? So, but they're having fun during the process. And building a business also is extraordinarily painful. It's a difficult thing. It's stressful. It is financially stressful, mentally stressful, physically stressful. I mean, it's stressful on your family life. So people will say, well, that's not really fun. So yeah, I agree, it's not fun. But what's fun is in the chase. It's in the building. It's in the creation of something. It's in seeing that look on your customer's face when they're happy. There's other ways to look at things like this, you know? So I don't know. I mean, I think building a business is fun. It has to be fun for us. So what's fun for us might not be fun for someone who's not an entrepreneur. They may say, holy shit, I don't want to put up with all that. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. I don't want to miss my vacations. I don't want to miss my kids' games because they have to go to a customer meeting. You know, they may not look at that as fun. So I think you got to look at what's fun for everyone. So it's harder, you know, like when I built my business, when we were very small, I was always looking for people that shared the mission. They shared the vision. They were hardworking. They shared our values. You know, our values were all about hardworking, keep doing the best thing we can for the customer, having a sense of urgency. And we took a lot of pride in being excellent, you know? So I wanted to hire people that, for them, those things would be fun. For a government employee in DC who works for the government, they would hate working for us. They would not find it fun. So I think the companies that are successful are able to, they know who they are and they know what their values are, and they try to hire people that'll fit in their values, because that way people will be motivated and enjoy their time. You know, I think, especially now and with the younger generation, and also with what's going on now and with the pandemic, and people are reevaluating what they really want to do in life. I think now more than ever, you're seeing a blending of work and play. It's kind of coming together, you know, work and life are kind of coming together in a way. People are working from home, for example. I mean, you know, that's a great example, a literal example of work and play coming together. So I think people are probably going to be expect more from employers. They're going to want to expect employers to step up and give them things that they're getting now that they ordinarily wouldn't have had. Flexibility, for example, you know, things like that. So, you know, what is fun? I guess fun is making sure that your team is aligned with your mission and that they're getting the same level of happiness and satisfaction when you do something great, you know. But the journey is hard. It's not always fun, you know. So when I say have fun, I mean, chase something, pursue a passion that really matters to you. Maybe you guys are getting me to think about that, my slides here. Because if you pursue a passion that's meaningful, that is fun. And also it's meaningful, you know, like who wants to work and not have any meaning for themselves or others? that to me is not, for me, it's not good, you know.
As
But
Simon Sinek says, what is your why?
yeah, what's your why? Exactly. That's a great question. And I think if you can satisfy your why, by definition, I think you should be having fun.
Very
So
true.
that's a tough one. That's a real deep philosophical question. I expect that from a Russian person, because you guys are very deep and very thoughtful and very well read, you know. So that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Tien, thank you so much for your talk. It was incredible pleasure speaking to you again and hearing your wisdom. Our participants are excited for your events, for this talk. Everybody were doing screenshots, asking for presentation. Extremely insightful. Thank you.
Well, it's a real pleasure, and I wish everybody luck. You got my contact info, so feel free to connect on LinkedIn or drop me an email if you have any questions. But thank you guys for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tien. Thank you. Have an amazing day.
Thank you. You too. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Alexander. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Ребятки, вот они 3 недели.
So guys, the 3 weeks are finished. They went by so fast. Today was the last way, and thank you all so much. For me, it was a great honor to host this program for 2 weeks and seeing this progress and seeing the first questions, how we make our pitch deck, how we make exits, how we